Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever walked into an IKEA store for the very first time, totally convinced you were just going to buy a single frying pan, and somehow walked out with a new rug, 3 houseplants, and this sudden overwhelming desire to renovate your entire kitchen? Well, you are absolutely not alone. Today, we're exploring the fascinating mechanics behind why IKEA makes way more money than you probably think. Because here is the secret we're going to unpack today. IKEA isn't simply in the furniture business. I mean, sure, they might seem like just a seller of affordable home goods, but that completely misses the real story. What we're really looking at here is a meticulously engineered, brilliantly disguised profit machine. It's designed to make great design affordable, all while building literally one of the most profitable retail systems on the planet.
Okay, let's dive into this and reverse engineer a customer journey that is practically universal. You don't just wander in, right? You enter through a single controlled doorway, and immediately you're funneled down this very specific winding path. You don't just walk past shelves of products, you walk through fully realized living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms. You sit on the sofas, you open the drawers, you test the mattresses. And then, somewhere right in the middle of this marathon, you inevitably sit down to eat some Swedish meatballs. Finally, hours later, you leave with a massive shopping cart full of products you never actually planned to buy when you parked your car. It feels like this fun adventure, but actually, it's a highly calculated system.
Here is the inciting incident for our entire analysis. Nothing, and I mean nothing you experience in that store is accidental. Everything is designed to reduce costs and increase sales. Every bookshelf, every flat-packed table, every massive warehouse-sized store, and yes, even those tiny little pencils they give you near the entrance, they all exist for a highly specific reason. It's essentially a psychological and logistical trap. But you know what the most brilliant part of this entire system is? The whole operation is designed to make you, the customer, do something highly unusual. Without even realizing it, you actually become an active part of their manufacturing process. To understand exactly how this works, it's fascinating to look back at how it all started. Back in 1943, in rural Sweden, a 17-year-old entrepreneur named Ingvar Kamprad started a small mail-order business. Now, at first, he was just selling everyday items, pens, wallets, picture frames. The furniture came much later. But Kamprad noticed a major problem. Good-looking, well-designed homes seemed completely reserved for wealthy families. He firmly believed ordinary people deserved well-designed furniture at affordable prices. The problem with that? Furniture is incredibly expensive to build, store, transport, and deliver. If he wanted lower prices, he literally had to rethink the entire industry. And that Trojan horse breakthrough moment? It happened in the 1950s when an employee simply removed the legs from a table just so it would fit inside a customer's car without getting damaged. That single, seemingly small decision to remove those table legs transformed IKEA forever. Just think about the traditional furniture model for a second. A fully assembled table takes up an enormous amount of space during transportation. That makes it incredibly expensive to ship, to store, and to deliver. Now, contrast that with the flat pack model, which fits neatly into a dense, compact box. Suddenly, delivery trucks could carry exponentially more products. Warehouses became vastly more efficient. Shipping costs absolutely plummeted, and damage during transport practically disappeared. But the biggest shift of all? Instead of paying factory workers to assemble every single product, IKEA shifted that final step of creation directly onto the buyer. Customers weren't just buying furniture anymore, they were participating in its final assembly. You trade your time and an Allen wrench for massively slashed prices, and honestly, everyone benefits.
Once you decide everything must fit into a flat box, design is no longer just about aesthetics, is it? It becomes about extreme efficiency. Designers started asking incredible questions, like, could fewer screws achieve the exact same structural strength? Could one single component serve multiple purposes across 3 different pieces of furniture? Could the packaging be shaved down to become just a tiny bit smaller? Could raw materials be used more effectively with absolute zero waste? When you are manufacturing products on this massive, global scale, every single gram matters, every centimeter matters, because every saved dollar multiplies across millions of products, essentially creating massive profit margins out of thin air.
And this brilliantly illustrates a completely reversed approach to product development. Instead of asking, what should we make, they ask, how can we build an excellent chair for this specific price? Most traditional companies operate by designing a cool product first, calculating the manufacturing cost second, and then slapping a retail price tag on it. IKEA does the exact opposite through target pricing. They decide up front that they want to sell a specific chair for, say, $40. Then the design teams work alongside engineers and suppliers from the very beginning, working entirely backwards. The mindset completely shifts to figuring out how to source, design, and flat package share that can realistically be manufactured within that strict budget. That single constraint changes every design decision they make.
Now, let's step off the manufacturing floor for a moment and talk about retail psychology. Traditional furniture stores displayed products one at a time, right? Like a long row of 20 isolated sofas. But IKEA mastered what psychologists call contextual selling. They display products in complete curated environments. You don't just see a sofa, you see an entire living room complete with bookshelves, lighting, rugs, coffee tables, plants, and artwork. Everything just works together harmoniously. Why? Because people find it infinitely easier to buy when they can vividly visualize ownership in their own homes. And remember that winding store layout we talked about earlier? By guiding you through nearly every single department, they actually force product discovery. A person coming in for a simple desk discovers and buys lamps, storage boxes, kitchen utensils, and candles along the way. Those small purchases quietly accumulate, and average transaction values skyrocket. Another wildly overlooked advantage lies in how they actually name these products. Billy, Malm, Pong, Kallax. Instead of using complicated robotic model numbers that you'd forget 5 seconds after reading them, IKEA gives its products memorable Swedish names, and this is incredibly clever from a marketing standpoint. These names become surprisingly easy to remember. Customers start recommending products to their friends by name rather than by some vague physical description. This strategy inherently strengthens brand recognition all around the globe, allowing them to build a massive cultural footprint without having to rely purely on expensive traditional advertising. But right in the middle of this highly optimized, hyper-efficient machine, you hit a strange roadblock. Seriously, why sell meatballs in a furniture store? For many shoppers, the Swedish meatballs are almost as famous as the furniture itself. But at first glance, dedicating massive amounts of expensive retail floor space to a cafeteria inside a home goods store seems completely bizarre. I mean, what does serving food actually have to do with selling couches?
Well, the answer is rooted purely in behavioral science. Hungry customers leave sooner, but comfortable customers stay longer. Shopping for furniture, especially in a giant warehouse, can be physically and mentally exhausting. Decision fatigue sets in fast. If a customer gets hungry and cranky, they're going to head straight for the exit, abandoning any potential purchases. By placing a restaurant strategically right in the store, IKEA encourages families to pause, refuel, and spend significantly more time inside the labyrinth. The math here is incredibly simple. Longer visits almost always lead to larger purchases. So yeah, even the food is quietly supporting the overarching retail strategy.
Of course, IKEA's optimization also looks heavily at the future. They've invested a ton in modern brand protection through sustainability, pouring resources into renewable materials, energy-efficient manufacturing, circular design principles, and even furniture buyback programs in certain markets. They totally recognize that modern consumers, especially younger ones, absolutely demand environmental responsibility. Naturally, they face real challenges: shrinking urban living spaces, global supply chain disruptions, the massive rise of online shopping. But by actively protecting the planet, they are simultaneously protecting their brand's relevance. They're ensuring that their massive global footprint remains a huge asset rather than becoming a public relations liability.
All of this builds to perhaps their greatest achievement, which isn't operational at all. It's psychological. By ruthlessly cutting costs, they didn't ruin the brand. They created what we can call aspirational affordability. Customers don't apologize for buying IKEA furniture. They proudly share their setups online. They're massive, cult-like global communities dedicated purely to IKEA hacks, modifying, painting, and customizing standard flat-pack pieces into these unique, personalized designs. Because the customer puts the furniture together themselves, the furniture actually becomes a starting point for creativity rather than just a finished, static product. That deep emotional connection and genuine sense of ownership is incredibly difficult for any competitor to copy.
In the business world, most companies scheme to figure out how to charge customers more. IKEA asks a fundamentally different question. How can we remove every unnecessary cost before the customer ever even sees the price? They prove that affordability doesn't have to mean sacrificing innovation. In fact, their extreme constraints inspired better ideas. Flat-pack furniture wasn't just a cheaper shipping method, it was an absolute revolution. Today, millions of homes contain at least one piece of IKEA furniture, representing decades of disciplined, obsessive thinking about logistics, psychology, and design. Sometimes the smartest way to make more money isn't by selling expensive products. It's by making affordable products so incredibly efficient that millions of people simply can't imagine living without them. And that is exactly why IKEA makes far more money than most people think. So the next time you find yourself leaving with a cart full of things you definitely didn't mean to buy, ask yourself, are you just decorating your home, or are you actively working the final assembly line of the world's most brilliant retail machine?
Thanks for joining me on this explainer.